All right, and we are live. All right, let's get started. All right, so just volume here. All right, cool. All right, so starting off a new game in Dark Souls. So really, the only thing we have to worry about is the class and gift. Male, female, doesn't matter. Alright, so there are lots of classes to choose from at the beginning of Dark Souls, and while not exactly, they're not important in the end game because of your build, but in the early game they can actually prove to make a large difference for getting players. So, warrior is good, high strength, high dexterity. You see, we 13 strength, 13 dex, 11 vitality, 12 endurance, which is really good. You always want to have, for a starting character, I would say you always want to have high endurance so you can do a lot of action. And more importantly, the warrior starts with a longsword and heater shield. So the heater shield provides 100% block defense, really good for beginning players as well. Next up is Knight, who starts out with good armor, but you won't be able to equip it all without fat rolling. And he starts with the broadsword, which is a good moveset, a little different from the longsword. I like the longsword better, but the Silver Kite shield also 100%. Wanderer starts with, I believe that's the target shield, which is good for parrying, and the scimitar. If you like a dex playthrough and you like fast characters, it's pretty good to start with, but you'll be finding yourself having to buy the heater shield almost immediately. Thief is my personal favorite to start with because he gets two items, two gifts, because he starts with the Master Key. Of course, it's a little tough, but I like Thief because I like his outfit, and I do like the dagger for bleed, but definitely not recommended for beginning character. Bandit is likewise a very good starting character, very good vitality, really good endurance, really high strength, which is really good for beginners. Spider Shield is an excellent starting shield, and the Battle Axe, once you get used to it, is a really good starting weapon. Hunter is pretty okay. Leather Shield does really good blocking. Starts with a longsword, and actually starts with a bow as well. So, depending on your playstyle, this can also be a very good starting class. Sorcerer is actually, despite magic being very overpowered in this game, it is not the best to start with because of his fragility. Doesn't have a lot of endurance, doesn't have a lot of strength. Starts with a dagger, really poor weapon early on, but the sorceries do give you a boost. Pyromancer is actually a really good starting class as well, despite the bad shield, because the axe is really good. Let me adjust the volume here again. Oh, hang on. Let me adjust the volume just a bit. Pyromancer is actually a pretty good starting class as well, because Pyromancy doesn't actually scale with anything other than the Pyromancy Flame item. So having fireball spells to begin with can be really useful. Hand axe is alright. Shield needs to be replaced immediately. Cleric is also a pretty good choice. The mace, traditionally in Dark Souls, has been incredibly overpowered. In Dark Souls, that is no exception. And having healing miracles supplement your Estus is pretty good for downtime. And of course, Deprived is good for experienced players because they start with really balanced stat spread, but definitely not recommended for beginning players. So let me enter the Discord real quick. Okay, let me bring OBS back. Alright, so let's get started. I would actually choose... Hang on, let me hit the Discord again. I wish I could get 2 sources up. That's fine. Actually, I could probably get 2 sources up, but I don't want to do that. Alright, so I would recommend for starting players, actually I would recommend Warrior for a lot of reasons. The Knight armor you can get pretty early on, and the hard leather armor is actually really good to begin with. It's light, but provides pretty good defense, and the starting weapons are incredibly good. You can actually probably stay with them for almost. Plus the 13-13 strength, dexterity, 12 endurance, and 11 vitality are very good, and the soul level at 4 is low, so your initial level ups will be really cheap. We're gonna do that. Gifts. Goddess's Blessing. Fully restores your HP and status. Not very useful because you only get 1. You can only use 1. I wouldn't recommend it. Black Firebomb. It's alright. It does a lot of damage. So, it's a good choice, definitely. Human Humanity is also a good choice. I always pick this one when I go Thief, because having extra 2 Humanities at the beginning is always very useful. Binox is basically a zoom-in function. Not very useful unless you really like looking at stuff. Pendant is completely useless. Don't pick it. The Master Key is very useful because you can open a lot of doors, skip a lot of areas if you know what you're doing. You know, making this. We'll cover the Tiny Being's Ring. This is actually very deceptive. Any sort of HP recovery in Souls game, any sort of passive HP recovery is always very low, unless you specifically build for it, and the ring definitely does not scale with you. Not very good at any point in the old Witch's Ring is only useful for a specific covenant, and you can get this later from trading with crows. So what we should go with is the Master Key, because if you can enter a lot of areas early, skip some areas that are annoying, and of course you can do some pretty cool stuff, which I will show off. Base, I like I always like going with the Astora Noble, build to semi-long, black, of course, customized. I tend to leave these fairly the same. Alright, so let's go ahead and get in it. Oh, let me adjust the audio then. Audio to about 64%. Let me know how that is. Alright, here we are again. So volume's down to about 60%. Let me know how that is compared to the voice. Get into it. Oh, I didn't pick my physique. Alright, cool. The physique this time, let's go large upper body. That always makes the armor look pretty good, actually. Yes, okay, to start game with this character. I'm gonna skip the cutscenes. I'll be skipping all cutscenes for this because no need. You can watch them on your own time when you play the game. Alright, so we start off in the Northern Undead Asylum. Now is a good time, actually, to cover the controls because while all of you already know the controls, still something important to talk about. And it's also important to talk about your stats. So, for now, you all know Vitality governs health, Attunement governs your spell slots, Endurance covers your stamina, which is important, Strength, damage, Dexterity, damage. Resistance is not really all that important. It's always been a dump set in Dark 1, and we've never really been sure why it's there, because raising it even to the max is not particularly good. Intelligence and Faith also govern damage, intelligence for spellcasting, faith for miracles. Now, the important thing is your equip load. As you can see, it right now it is 17.4 out of 52. So when your equip load, let's see if I have a. So right now you'll see my character has a pretty good roll, but you can see it takes some time getting back up. Now if you compare this to if we took off all his armor, an equip load of 1 out of 50. His roll is much faster. So this is because if you are, there are 3 thresholds in Dark Souls 1 for roll speed. If you have 25%, I believe it's either 20 or 25% equip compared to your max. So in this case, 25% would be, I don't know, 15 maybe? I'm bad at math. Maybe 15, maybe, yeah, I'd say around 15, 14, maybe around 13. Actually, no, it'd be around 13 for 25%. Around 13, then you will do a fast roll. If you are at 50% or below, you will do that medium speed roll. And if you are at 70%, if you are over 50%, you will do the fat roll that you definitely don't want. Right now, I'm going to try. So it's normal, and for beginning players, I don't actually recommend this, so I will in fact be playing at 50%, because this is what I think beginning players will likely be doing, wearing armor to sort of get that extra defense as they gain a handle on boss timings and learning how to dodge. Because ultimately, what you want to be doing is getting that 25% roll speed and dodging most attacks. We're at 13.9 right now with no helmet, getting that medium roll, and that's alright. Of course, now's a good time also to talk about controls. Of course, R1 is your attack, R2 is your heavy attack, L2 is your parry, L1 is your block. If you don't have a shield, you do this little punch. Triangle is to two-hand your weapon. Circle, of course I'm operating on PS4 controls here. Circle would traditionally be dodge. I have it mapped Japanese style to X, but yes, circle will be dodging. And X is to select. And square is to use your items. Currently I have none. And the D-pad, of course, is to switch your items around. Of course, holding down dodge button will dash, also affected by your weight. So it's worth noting that it's very important in Dark Souls to get a feel for the controls. You need to know the controls inside and out, and basically intuitively. If ever there's a time where you have to think about which button to press, it means that you haven't practiced enough to get the buttons into your muscle memory. In the Asylum, not much to say, most of you have already probably played it. You open the door. Asylum demon attacks you. Comes down from the top. And it's worth noting that you may want to actually circle the Asylum demon for a little bit here and get used to his attacks and get used to his timing. But there's really no need. So we run to the gate and hold that fight off for later. Bonfire. And of course here is when we get items. Document this one shot. The heater shield. And if you notice, we can hit square to look at its stats, and we see that it has 100 physical damage reduction, 30% magic reduction, 70% fire, 50% lightning, and 55 stability. I believe we can also hit select or back on a 360 controller. You can get some helpful tooltips. So stability is the stability of player defense. The higher this value, the less stamina consumed when taking attacks, and also, they don't tell you this, but the less recoil as well. So 55 is a pretty good average amount for medium type shields. Equip this. Of course, we can just run, shield equipped, and get our longsword. Let this guy go now, because there's something else we need to do. Longsword. Okay, always check your weight when you're equipping things. You can make sure you don't hit over that 50% mark. Of course, longsword has a stab. If you do the R2 again, it does an upward slash. Here's the R1s. Two-handed R1s. I believe the R2 is a slash. Yep, followed by another one. So this is why the longsword is really good early on, because the stab gives you distance, and the R1 is really fast and covers a wide horizontal arc, which is good against crowds of enemies. Your shield has a block and a parry. Standard stuff. So now it bears talking about... Oh, the guy's back. Let's go ahead and kill this guy. When you hear that little noise, it means that the enemy has died, and it's your cue to stop swinging. I usually swing once more, just to ensure the enemy is actually dead, just to be safe. But typically it's a good idea to conserve stamina. You usually never want to, if you look at my bar, you never want to run out of stamina. You need to get used to how many swings you can do. For longsword, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I still have enough to roll. So if we look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, roll. That empties my stamina bar. Honestly, you don't really want to do that. So look what happens when I roll. Stamina recovers. Now look what happens when I run out of stamina. It takes a little longer for stamina to recover from 0. Especially, I believe, when you're rolling. Yeah, when you finish rolling like that, not only does it queue additional ones if you mash, it also takes longer to recover. So you never want to exhaust your stamina bar like that. You always want to make sure you have a little bit more to do some sort of action. Now, another thing to note before I move on is if I dash, stop, you see your stamina recovers fairly quickly. If I'm wearing a shield, however, and I have my shield up, you'll see that stamina recovers a lot slower. So let's do that a little bit, and then you'll notice when I drop my shield, my stamina recovers a lot faster. So when you have a shield up, it's important to note that if you are circling enemies, it's important to drop your shield. Always keep this in mind and try practicing. We'll see this later. Let's move on. Another thing you can do, as this up here will show you, is a jumping attack, which is forward R2. Forward R2, I don't think you can do it on a dash. No, not this one. So a forward R2 and a forward R1 kick is really good at Dark Souls. Get used to this and try and master it. It'll stagger enemies really effectively, and also break through some shield turtling enemies as well. Jumping R2 is useful if you want to get some extra distance and also some extra damage. You don't want to do a dash. So it's good situationally for spacing. Again, you always want to practice these moves on enemies until you're comfortable with using them. For example, try doing 10 jumping attacks in a row. Yeah, I just failed it, so that's the reason I'll try doing 10 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. So basically, you want to do this to basically train your muscle memory. So when you have to do a jumping R2 in a high pressure situation, as Dark Souls often presents you with, you can do it immediately. It's sort of important to note with any move or skill set. Now the boulder comes down, and just go off to the side here. And of course we talk to Oscar. Thora?
Oh.
Yeah. Gives us
Regrettably.
our Sunny D.
Oh.
And the waiting.
No.
Right. Farewell, my friend. And of course there's the guy at the top. This is important in combat. Always have your shield up, block the attack, retaliate, and I know that I have enough time to go in for a second attack, but it's always better to err on the side of caution. Either do 1 or 2 attacks. So we'll see this in the next one. And remember, clicking on the right stick will lock onto an enemy. Important. You see I traded an attack that we had. What I want to do is wait till a block. You'll see the other enemy hit me in the recovery. So it's important to separate your enemies as well. Always try and take Souls enemies one at a time. Bounce. 1, 2. You see he's dead. You'll see there I used an R1 and R2 just to make sure I would get that distance when the R1 pushed him away. So now let's talk about some combat basics with this convenient sword and shield hollow. You'll see that he has a more varied moveset. However, he always bounces off, so make sure that you always block with a shield, because you can then easily retaliate. When you attack enemies, you want to always keep a pretty safe distance. You don't want to get up close to the enemy. This gives you less time to react. So you always want to have a good distance away so that the enemy has to come to you. And then you can always do a lot of circling. Never stand still when you're fighting an enemy in Dark Souls. You always want to keep moving around. And of course, you see I block his attack. When I block his attack, I drop my shield to recover stamina quicker. Like that, and move away. So block, move away if you want, or block, retaliate, and then back away to reassess your situation. Now let's talk about rolling to avoid attacks. Try this on certain enemies that you know the attack patterns well. You can see he's winding up. So, you can roll in. You see I timed that badly, and actually took counter damage, which in Dark Souls will always happen when you're performing an action and an attack interrupts that action. So, a roll always has invincibility for its turn. So as a general rule of thumb, if you're in the rolling animation, you're probably invincible. So that means you can roll into enemies like that, and you saw I took no damage. Always practice this, because it's very useful during bosses and tougher enemies. The rolling past enemies is good as well. So you want to take an enemy that doesn't do a lot of damage, and you know the move setup, try and anticipate its attacks. In Dark Souls, there's always a wind-up, there's always a tell. Dark Souls, contrary to popular belief, is not a game about good reactions. It's a game about good reads. Anyone can do it. Don't let anyone dissuade you. All it takes is practice, and that's what people aren't willing to do. They aren't willing to put the time in to practice being able to read the predictions that are common in every Dark Souls enemy. Even though the patterns may be different, the principles are the same. When an enemy is winding up for an attack, you can go in and time your rolls effectively. It doesn't require a reaction. You don't have to see an arm twitch or a finger move in a single frame. There's always some sort of tell you can use to your advantage. It's all about learning patterns and being able to dodge through them. Also sets you up for circling. So in Dark Souls, it's always convenient to circle. And if you circle an enemy, it's very often they'll leave themselves open and you'll be able to backstab. To do a backstab, the easiest way I found learning... Oh, I got a longsword. Nice. The easiest way to do it while learning, for example, is to circle around the enemy, stop whatever you're doing, and just tap the R1 button. If you're basically glued to their back, you'll do the backstab animation. You'll see this practiced later on. Now, for this boss, I'm actually going to two-hand my weapon for more damage. What I want you guys to do is to watch how I observe enemy boss patterns and then dodge through them and retaliate. You'll see that I always try to manage my stamina, that I always have room for an emergency roll in case I made a bad read. Also, it's worth noting that I'm not playing with DS Fix on because OBS will crash if DS Fix is turned on. So, a thing to note that is if you're playing on DS Fix at 60 frames per second, this actually affects the length you can fall and the length you go during a roll. Dark Souls runs at 30 frames per second normally. What this means, basically, is that when you're playing with DS Fix at 60 FPS, you are going to have to do the plunging attack earlier. The plunging attack, of course, I always initiate by rolling off and mashing R1. Always lock onto the boss. Encircling. Always stay moving. Always circle the boss. There we see he has an attack. If you like, if you have a shield, keep your shield up. Roll through that. I don't know if I rolled a frame problem here. Blaming on DS6 can be rough. So when you fight a boss, don't be in a hurry. Just try and be calm. Observe the boss and see what it does. Oh, that frame rate is rough. But yeah, observe what the boss does. If he's going up, you can back away, and you'll see that that's nothing. You can go in and get a hit. And that, you see, I went for the roll too early, but since I actually went for it early, you can actually correct your mistake by rolling again. Of course, note when the boss is open. That's a good one. As is that, is a big swing. Leaves him open. Always be careful of the follow-up though. That's why you want to get behind the boss. Usually bosses don't have attacks in a combination that'll hit behind them. That one you see I did not manage to roll it from, but blocked. Always a good idea, which is why you always want to have your shield up. That one you can roll into, and this one you can roll into as well. So don't feel like you have to kill the boss on your first try. You see that one can be done by circling as well. Like I said, don't feel like you have to beat the boss on your first try. Take the time to learn the boss pattern. It's much more valuable later on in New Game Plus and stuff like that. But if you take the time to learn the boss, that means you'll do that much better next time. You'll see that I messed that up, but still managed to get away without taking a hit. Also, it's worth noting that sometimes you don't have to roll at all. For example, the attack that you just did, the overhead, you can often avoid just by blocking and moving away. Take advantage of boss attacks where you really don't have to do anything to avoid. You see that one I did have to roll, but I blocked it. Alright, so now try to observe principles that I just talked about as I two-hand the weapon and fight the boss. Of course, immediately after a roll, you can hit R1 to a rolling attack. So counterintuitively, rolling towards the boss and being confident about your invincibility frames is often the best idea. You'll see I cut really close to 0 stamina there, but when you know that the damage you do is enough to kill an enemy or kill a boss, always go for the kill shot. If you are 99% certain that a full stamina bar combo will kill the boss, always go for it. Sometimes it pays off to be bold. That's the Undead Asylum. Now let's move on to Firelink Shrine. Alright. So let's talk about leveling. When you're leveling up, you want to take into consideration several things. You don't want to spread your points too thin because as you level up, as you see, the requirements go up exponentially. So it's always valuable to target your key stats. What I mean by that are 3 stats. Your main damage stat, endurance, and vitality. Stamina is life. The longer your stamina bar, more actions you can perform. And in Dark Souls, the more actions you can perform, the more chances you have at living and getting an edge over your opponents. Vitality is important for new players because it lets you take more hits, it lets you perform, it lets you make more mistakes. So my advice is to always level up into sort of what I call solid numbers. But for now, I always see how much I can level up. I can level up 3 levels. So for now, I'm going to put 2 into strength, round off at 15. I always like to have my damage stats move, say like 15. I usually like to level up in 1s and 2s and 5s. If I can't, that's fine, but I always go for the damage level up first, because ultimately being offensive in the game is what allows you to kill enemies quicker and end encounters faster, thus minimizing the chance for mistakes. The next one, I'm pretty happy with 12 endurance right now. The endurance cap in Dark Souls is at 40, In other games, it's different, but you always want to hit soft cap for stats. What that means is there's a certain level where your returns will diminish and you won't get as good stats. Usually it's at 40. So for now, I'm actually going to bring Vitality up by 1 so that I am level with my lowest vital stat. That's a good practice job. Alright. So now, in Firelink Shrine, there are several useful items. For example, there is a Humanity. Or rather, 3 of them. Humanity lets you return to human form and also kindle bonfires. Kindling bonfires will increase your amount of Estus flasks restored at those bonfires. You do need a special item to, I believe, go past 10. I believe you can only go to 15 and 20, which is the maximum, after you get the Rite of Kindling from the Catacombs, which we'll cover maybe eventually. So there are lots of items you can get in Firelink Shrine. Begin by going up here. This is Petrus of Thorland. He's not important. I won't be covering NPC side quests. Those are for you to discover. But I'm not going to bother with it. Suffice to say, he's not a great guy. And if you go up these stairs, items, both lost and dead. I don't really remember these items as much anymore, so bear with me if I don't remember. We'll try and get as many items as we play through. Roll down here. Oh, and it's worth noting, an action I didn't mention, when you hold down dash, and then press the button again, you'll do a jump. This is sometimes useful for making certain jumps over chasms, or performing certain dodges. In this chest, you have a Morning Star and a Talisman. Homeward Bones, which return you to the last bonfire you visited, which is very useful. And a Cracked Red Eye Orb, 4 of them in fact, which are for invasions, which, since I'm playing offline, is not something of course, a last chest. Here. Lloyd's Talisman. Okay, also for PvP. So let's equip the Morning Star first. When you equip something, always hit triangle to see if you hit square and then triangle, so X toggle display, Y toggle status, you will enter these 2 screens. Item, stat screen, or stat screen. So you'll see here, by equipping the Morning Star, I actually increase my damage to 97. You'll see here the base damage of the weapon. Bonus is the scaling it gets from strength. You'll see under Param bonus, it has a C scaling bonus with strength, and no scaling with dexterity, intelligence, or faith. Under Rec Param, which is required parameters, you'll see that it requires 11 strength to use, and 0 in every stat. In Dark Souls, if you don't meet the minimum strength requirements, you can try two-handing it. Two-handing a weapon will, for all intents and purposes, increase your strength value by 1.5, which may allow you to actually equip the weapon in 2 hands. That's for advanced players. As a beginning player, you always want to make sure your strength and other stats match the weapon you're trying to use, because you always want to one-hand it, if possible, because it lets you use a shield. Let's equip the Morning Star for now. And then if we go back and see, the longsword will reduce me to 95. So the Morning Star has quite a different moveset. It is a club-type weapon. Let's move back over here. Here's the R1. R2. And then two-handed. R1. And the R2. So as you can see, the Morning Star is pretty unwieldy. But there's a reason why we want it. Once again, going back to the item levels, or the item stats, you'll see that under attack type, it says strike. Under longsword, it's regular/thrust. Regular usually means slashing. Strike weapons are useful against skeletons, which take extra damage from them. You'll see that I don't do a lot of damage to these skeletons regardless. Oh geez. So the skeletons, quite honestly, as a beginning player, you may find them challenging. They do have the ability to parry you as well. If you're not careful, they'll take a certain stance and try and parry you. However, the skeletons are also good to train against to get used to fighting, because they have really fast movement that you can try and get used to. Don't do this too much though, it's easy to get frustrated at starting off by their attacks. But if you want something to practice against, nothing is better because you're right next to the bonfire and fire them. But you'll notice that the mace also causes them to collapse, which is very useful. The mace doesn't do this with every enemy, it doesn't knock a certain enemy down for instance, but it's a special property against skeletons, why we want to grab it. If we were using the sword, it wouldn't be very useful. So when it's time to heal and you're fighting an enemy, you're always trained to come at you, and you try and escalate. Of course, I've active for enemies. Remember, it's always important to be mindful of your surroundings. So here, really what you want to do is start running around and getting items from the graveyard. Don't worry if you die. 57 souls isn't very important. So for now, just watch the pathing that I take. There are several key items that we want to grab here. Oh, there we go. That's alright. What's important is that you grab this Viking normally. So what we're going to be going for is a strength build. Strength builds are very good for beginners. Strength weapons always do high damage and are very high reward weapons. And quite frankly, in Dark Souls 1, the game is balanced towards strength weapons. So ultimately, the Zweihander is what you want to get. Don't worry, there's a spear and a shield, but they're not as good as the longsword or the heater shield. Second. Alright. That. Get back into it. Alright, so for now, we don't need any more this turn. Let's get back to the longsword. And you head up this way. Get to the undead. You can get to the Undead Burg. Let's do a time check in a second here. These enemies. 3 things there. Nope. I'm going to check real quick that they didn't follow me, because sometimes they can wander. Alright, let me do a quick time check here. Alright, so it looks like this time I'll be able to make it to the first bonfire in the Burg. I'll call it for now. This guy, if you try and get at him, this guy will drop firebombs on you. Once again, just another lesson the game is trying to teach you to be aware of your surroundings. Of course, there's an axe guy here, but usually it's a good idea to wait until he attacks. Circle around. The longsword will do it, thanks to our increased strength. Okay, R2 it. So it's important to understand what weapons to use and when. Rather, what attacks to use. R2 didn't quite finish him, but did a good job. We could use a plunging attack, but it could place us off the cliff. So, just run back down and engage this guy normally. If you're not feeling as confident as I am navigating and fighting on near a cliff face, just lure him back here. Of course, this net. Full of the Lost Hut. Now, if you're feeling brave, you can make this jump. Simply run towards the edge, and jump. That. And and then just hug the wall here. Don't dash. Jog normally. Hug the wall. Get a Ring of Sacrifice. Ring of Sacrifices are alright. They protect your souls, and if you're in human form and die, you don't hollow out. I don't really use them because I don't think they're very useful, but if you're not feeling confident, you have a lot of souls, you may want to consider it. So if you do a dash, you can make it back. Don't worry if you can't get it initially, it is a tricky jump. So we just run over here. Soul of the Lost Undead. It's good to save these for, really, I like to save them for merchant items or when I need a small push to level up. There's a rat. Use the R2 in a tight corridor. You'll see. But sometimes they bounce off the wall. It won't always happen, but when you have a vertical attack, when you have a lateral attack, like the stab, it's really better off to use it in tight corridors like this. Another lesson, and of course, being aware of your surroundings. So a dragon's going to come here. Fun tip. Or, that's earlier. Later on, excuse me. So it's useful to get used to fighting more than one enemy. That's why it's useful to have a longsword. Generally, if you can separate them a little bit and get them turned around in different directions, it pays off. And then when they're separated, you can usually use them for backstab. Remember that in this version of Dark Souls 1, backstabs will make you invincible. And generally, it's not a good idea to block firebombs like that. If you have to block, that's definitely better than taking full damage. 2. He was winding up for another attack, but I knew that the R2 would be short sword. Same moveset, I believe, as the longsword, but not as good reach or damage. I believe it also scales better with dexterity. As a strength build playthrough, we are not interested. Oh, there's an item. There's also some items that way. They're not all that useful in my opinion. There's no need to uncover all items unless you really want to, but if you want to do that, I recommend looking up. Right down. Usually, if you time it right, roll through the stagger. Not necessary. Stagger doesn't do damage. It's just a little thing. A little speedrun stat to get things moving fast. Over here, the guy actually attacks you with a crossbow. You want to be mindful of your attacks. You usually want to do 1 or 2 attacks followed, and then move position so he doesn't hit you. Get backstabs if you can, so further increasing your invincibility. Go through this door is a wooden shield. If you're a character who didn't start out with a heater shield, it is a really useful item. Since we started out with a 100% physical reduction shield, we don't need it. The heater shield will actually give us a good amount of mileage throughout the early game. Crossbow guy, just run up close, and there's not much there. Light the bonfire. What I like to do here, since this bonfire will not give you 10 Estus flasks when you rest, this is where I like to use my first humanity. Oh, and it bears noting, actually, at this point, you can equip up to 5 items for your square short action. I like to take out every single item as this, unless I am doing something specific, like fighting a boss and I want resins or firebombs. Whenever I'm going around the stages normally, I only have the Estus flask, so I don't run the risk of accidentally switching to something else. It's always available, it's always the first slot. If I need to use an item, I simply use it from the menu. So here, I want to use 2 humanity. Also, it's worth noting that humanities will instantly heal you up to full health. So sometimes when you're in a pinch, don't be afraid of popping that humanity if it means the difference between beating a boss or beating a tough enemy. The first what we want to do is reverse hollowing. Reversing hollowing and becoming human is, of course, the only way to kindle a bonfire. We want to kindle a flame. I always like to do this bonfire specifically because it's the one that you're probably going to return to the most in the early game. You're probably going to have a lot of trouble getting used to the Berg initially. Also, there are some tough enemies. Alright, so that about does it for this one. We will cover the Burg and the Parish the next time I do this stream, hopefully sometime this week. A bit of parting advice is this area of the Burg is a really good place to practice sort of getting used to combat. Always try and be mindful of your surroundings. That's always a good idea. Get used to doing combat. Get used to block, attack, block and attack. Do attack. Don't do too many, just do one or two. Also, another thing is manipulate. Dark Souls is really more about what you can see, what you're aware of, what you're trying to manipulate. Always try and lock on to one enemy, even if there's multiple ones. Lock on to one enemy. He's the one that you're going to sink first. Try and decide which one's the most dangerous, that sort of thing. Try and always move the camera around when you're not. When you're not locked in, always try and move the camera around in a way to let you see what's going on. And of course you'll see I locked on nice and early. For shielded enemies, you can either two-hand them to break their shield, or you can kick them. That'll break their shield open as well. Of course, you see if these enemies, if you try R1 them, that about does it. Good luck, everyone. Yeah. 係啦。